Interesting.
Hollywood tough guy, in your opinion. You accept it, of course.
When you say tough guy, do you mean martial artist or just tough guy?
I mean, Stephen, for real. If he was on the street and there was a situation, you wanted this Hollywood guy by your side because he could defend himself. It's that hard to think of a legit one?
Can you think of one?
Michael Jai White.
Can I laugh in your face?
Sadness.
Stephen Frederick Seagal was born on the 10th of April 1952 in Lansing, Michigan. His mother was of Irish descent while his father was of Russian Jewish descent. His mother was of Irish descent and his father was of Russian Jewish descent. I think someone's Irish mother might have been a bit too friendly with the milkman. Stephen was reportedly a frail, sickly child who suffered from asthma. This apparently changed when he was 5 years old and the family moved to California. Stephen seems to have had a pretty normal childhood, listening to loud rock music as a teen and working for a friendly old Japanese man at a dojo. This fairly inconspicuous job would change Stephen's life forever. He discovered a love for Japanese martial arts and moved to Japan in 1971. This move didn't last long though, and by 1974 he was back in California studying Aikido, where he met his first wife, who was the daughter of an Aikido master. Later that year, the pair moved back to Japan, where they had 2 children, and Stephen taught Aikido at her family's dojo. Some claim that Stephen moved to Japan in order to escape the military draft that was going on in America at the time. While in Japan and teaching at his wife's family dojo, Seagal claims that he fought off the Yakuza who were trying to muscle in on his turf. His wife later said that in fact he chased away 2 drunks, and that was it. Not much more to that story. While in Japan, Seagal claims that he was approached by the CIA and this was the point that he began to work with them. We will look at these claims more in depth later on in the video. Stephen would bounce back and forth between the USA and Japan, opening dojos in New Mexico, North Hollywood and West Hollywood. This continued until Stephen, the dirty little dog, cheated on his wife and kids with this lady, who he married while he was still married to his first wife. And while still married to both of these women, he cheated on both of them with this lady, who he married. This time after he had divorced both of his other wives. Sadly, they got divorced 7 years later, and I may as well get all of his wives out of the way. So he is currently married to this lady, and they are not divorced, which is nice. In total, Stephen has 7 children, 3 grandchildren, and is the guardian to this lady, who is the daughter of this guy. But who is this guy? Well, let's take a quick detour, as he's a pretty interesting fella. He was born in 1938 and became the second most important figure in Tibetan Buddhism, just below the Dalai Lama. He fought against the Chinese communists only to switch sides and support the Chinese occupation of Tibet when the communists were about to win the war. He became an important figure in the Communist Party bureaucracy. He then wrote a detailed attack on the human rights crimes committed by China in Tibet called the 70,000 character petition. He was imprisoned for this and declared an enemy of the Tibetan people. When he was released from prison, he had been politically rehabilitated, so was welcomed back to the Communist Party. But being the complicated guy that he was, in 1989 he gave a speech in Tibet that criticised Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution. 5 days later he died under mysterious circumstances, with many suspecting foul play. Anyway, after he was released from prison, he gave up his vows of an ordained monk and got himself a girlfriend. They had a daughter who would later become under the protection of Steven Seagal. She was schooled in the USA for 10 years, with Seagal being her bodyguard slash minder slash legal guardian. I'm unsure if Seagal took this role upon himself or if it was bestowed upon him, so make of this what you wish. I just found it interesting.
I'm gonna take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank.
Steven Seagal is a 7th Dan black belt in Aikido. But what is Aikido? Well, it's a Japanese martial arts with origins dating back to the 12th century, but is mainly thought to have begun in the 1930s with this man. It's worth noting that Seagal claimed to have studied under this man, but it turns out that the guy died before Sensei Seagal stepped foot in Japan. Aikido uses the opponent's momentum against them and is designed to stop the person attacking you from being injured. In modern times, Aikido has faced criticism for not being very useful in the real world, and to be honest, I can see why. It's hard to imagine the things that you're seeing on screen working against someone that's not being compliant, but I'll leave it up for you to make your own mind up, I guess. One thing I'm sure that we can all agree on is that it looks pretty cool, and this set him in good stead when Hollywood came knocking at his door. I'm just going to pause the story for a sec. If you follow my channel and you're unfamiliar with Steven Seagal, you're probably wondering why I'm making a video about some washed up movie star. It's not the normal outlandish characters, what's going on? Trust me, Steven Seagal is one of the wackiest people that I've ever made a video about. I have no idea how long this video will end up being, but we have so much random crazy stuff to go over. I mean, you'll see later, but I couldn't make this shit up. It would just be too outrageously ridiculous to be believed. Anyway, before we get onto that, let's continue with his backstory so we can get a full picture of the man. In 1987, he starred in his first movie called Above the Law. He then had a string of hit movies and soon was on top of the world, with the peak coming in 1992 with the smash hit Under Siege. This was the pinnacle for Steven Seagal. He was a world-famous, rich movie star. Men wanted to be him. Women wanted to be with him. For a mere mortal, it would have been hard to not let this fame go to your head and start acting like a complete arsehole. But luckily, Stephen was a humble, well-grounded man, and he didn't start acting like an arrogant c***.
They did ask me to do a screen test, and I did. And they said, man, you know, this guy has got so much, you know, going on. He's got the charisma, he's got the look, he's got the action.
Stephen was the man of the moment, and he was asked to host a comedy show Saturday Night Live. This didn't go too well, with the cast members calling Seagal the show's worst ever host. They claimed that he was humorless, that he mistreated the cast and writers. He refused to do a comedy sketch because two of the fictional characters in the sketch had previously said that they could beat up Steven Seagal, and they called him the biggest jerk who has ever been on the show.
By the way, I was there when he hosted SNL, one of the most famous nightmare, like, can't re-show that show ever.
If you make fun of yourself, it will benefit you, and we promise you. And if you don't, and you fight it so much, and
continued to pump out movies for many years with differing amounts of success. But as is the way of the world, when you reach the top of the hill, the only way forward is down, and Steven Seagal's movie career began the steep decline to the bottom, with such classics as Born to Raise Hell, Against the Dark, sounds a bit racist, A Dangerous Man, China Salesman, and who could forget Gut Shot Straight. Steven has made a ridiculous amount of movies, far too many for me to mention here, and as you would expect, he has been nominated for many awards over the years.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Because now, I will snatch every motherfucker birthday.
I have great shooting skills.
I think I can be very funny.
I'm a writer too, and
they made me come and sit with the other masters, and they introduced me as their senpai.
So, here we are, the weird stuff. Our little mate Steven is a man of many talents, some of which you may not be aware of, so let's dive down the rabbit hole a little further, starting with probably his best known side hustle, reality TV. From 2009 to 2014, he starred in a show named Steven Seagal, Lawman. This part of the story begins in the 1980s when he was given the ceremonial rank of Reserve Deputy Chief by Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana. Steven seems to have taken this ceremonial rank to heart and liked the thought of being a sheriff so much that he made a TV show out of it. The show saw Steven running around Louisiana arresting bad guys with the help of real police.
A suspect, 6 feet tall, thick build, shoulder-length dreads. Inside of the apartment, there's supposedly a .45 caliber gun. That's in a bedroom that's all the way in the back. And it's gonna be me with the shield going in first, followed by the long gun. Chief Seagal gonna be third, and the rest of the crew can follow in however we see fit.
turn on the ground, man. Get that guy. He just shoved something in his mouth.
He rammed it in his throat.
Yeah, When we hit the house, we encountered a lot more people than we anticipated. Now everything's under control, so we're talking to everybody.
The show was a pretty big success, to be fair, and it was the biggest season opener for any A&E series ever, gaining 3.6 million viewers on its premiere. If one of my video premieres ever gets 3.6 million viewers, I'll post a video of me dressed like Steven Seagal fucking a blow-up doll of Vladimir Putin. Anyway, the show was suspended in 2010 due to a lawsuit filed against Seagal, but we'll come on to that on the lawsuit chapter of this video. Yes, we have an entire chapter dedicated to the many lawsuits this man has had. Well, maybe I can give you a little taste now. The show was suspended because he was sued for sex trafficking. That's it. That's all you're going to get right now. The first one's free, bitch. Next time you'll have to pay with your mouth. Anyway, the show was reinstated and ran until 2014, but was not renewed for another season, and no explanation was given as to why this didn't continue. We'll look at another lawsuit later that may be the reason why though. So next up we have probably my favourite Steven Seagal moment and pretty much the reason why I started to make this video. He had an energy drink named Steven Seagal's Lightning Bolt. Sadly this has been discontinued, so I will never know the life-changing taste that this beverage had, but the adverts for this drink say more about the way that Steven sees himself than anything that I could ever say in this video. Let's take a look. Unfortunately, these videos are copyright claims, so I can't show you them, and I don't really fancy paying all of my money to Steven Seagal for this video. I'd recommend that you check them out though, because they're pretty fucking hilarious. If YouTube allows it, I will add them to the members version of the video right now.
You only pick on me because I'm blind. Yeah.
We've got a lot to go over in this chapter, so let's keep it moving. He is also a musician. He has released 2 albums, one of which featured Stevie Wonder, which is pretty cool. He does all types of music, but mostly specialises in blues guitar. He has a vast collection of guitars, some of which were owned by Jimi Hendrix, Muddy Waters and Bo Diddley.
On the 7th hour, on the 7th day, on the 7th month, 7 doctors say I was born for good luck, and that you gonna have to see. I got $700, baby. Ain't you gonna make moves?
So, now we're going to get into some of the more obscure stuff. Firstly, he was honoured as the first private citizen to destroy a nuclear device. This was taken from what I think is his official website, so yeah. Again, this is from his website. Apparently, he was given this honour by a Japanese mayor because he donated $100,000 to personally disarm and dispose of a high-risk Russian nuclear missile. He also has a discontinued line in aftershave named Scent of Energy and Scent of Action. Not sure what action smells like, but I imagine it to be musky. He is a big fan of carrots and an expert in melons.
Nice. Gato.
If it's ready.
Gato.
By the way, this friendly looking old guy giving him the melon is the Belarusian president, who is said to be Europe's last true dictator. So that's a thing. And on the topic of Eastern European dictators, Steven Seagal is super best friends with Vladimir Putin. Putin has given Seagal the Order of Friendship Award, which is an award given to foreign nationals whose work, deeds and effort have been aimed at the betterment of relations for the Russian Federation and its people. Seagal has called Putin one of the world's greatest leaders. He would consider Putin like a brother and made a cute birthday message for Vladimir on his birthday. To be fair, there does seem to be a little bit of confusion about just how friendly the two are, with one of Putin's spokesmen saying that he wouldn't necessarily say he's a huge fan, but he's definitely seen some of his movies. My favourite part about this little bromance is the way that Steven says Vladimir's name.
Vladimir Putin.
Not sure why I like that so much really, but I fucking love it.
Vladimir Putin.
Steven Seagal reportedly holds citizenships in 3 countries: the United States, Serbia and Russia. So Serbia was on that list. The Serbian Prime Minister hired Seagal to train his soldiers on how to be more Seagalian. I don't really know what that means. He represented the Russian firearms manufacturer Oris in both a promotional capacity as well as lobbying for the easement of US import restrictions on Russian sporting firearms, and he was set to have his own signature long-range rifle sold by the company, but this didn't work out. I'm not sure why. He also seems very confused about where he came from.
I'm a little bit Asian, and I'm a Russian Mongol, and I'm Russian.
You have Italian descent?
Yeah, I have some Italian on my mother's side, and my mother was American Indian, and my father is a Russian Mongol.
I don't know what color I am, but I know one thing. In the blues, like I said, there was no color, but also I was the only one that wasn't black that I knew that played exactly like them, because I was raised with them. I didn't learn from a record.
I'm Russian. My family are from Vladivostok and Belarus, and
I think the foundation of all people has to be where we come from ultimately.
Stephen also has a very large sword collection, but not only does he have a very large sword collection, he is in fact the world's foremost expert on antique swords, with major auction houses calling him to authenticate samurai swords. Apparently, he reportedly had a custom gun made for him once a month. He is also an outspoken environmental and animal rights activist. This already sounds like a lot of stuff, but we're not done yet. Not even close. Steven Seagal is a deep rabbit hole, so let's keep descending a little deeper. Sensei Steven Seagal is also a Buddhist, but not just any Buddhist. Of course he's not. He is the reincarnation of a 17th century treasure revealer who found an ancient hidden text, and who is the reincarnation of one of the main disciples of this guy, who foresaw the dark time in Tibet. Some have claimed that Stephen paid for this title, but honestly I have no idea if this is true or not. In 2011, Seagal was sworn in as Deputy Sheriff of Hudspeth County, Texas. Sensei Seagal was also extorted by the mob. It's a long story, so I'll give you the shortened down version. A long-term producer and friend of Stephen felt that Seagal owed him money due to Stephen backing out of a 4-movie deal. So the producer called his friends in the Gambino crime family, who kidnapped Seagal and threatened him until he gave them $700,000. Later on, the FBI, who were investigating the Gambino crime family, heard them laughing and joking on wiretaps about shaking down Seagal. Stephen ended up going to the police about the matter, and the producer was sent to prison for a year and fined $75,000.
So they sit down with him a couple of times, threaten him, do all kinds of stupid shit. Steven Seagal, all those karate movies, remember them things? He shit in his pants, I think, twice. From what I heard from some FBI people I knew that I remained friendly with, he brought, what do those kids bring, that blanket, safety blanket, they hold on to it all the time? He held on to his blanket on the stand while he was testifying the whole time. The agent laughed. He said, "Sammy, this ain't the movies." The guy, when he went in the back room, was hysterical, crying. 2 agents had to hug him.
Stephen was also an outspoken supporter of the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014, which led to him being banned from Ukraine, which he refers to as a fascist state. He also had a show cancelled at a blues festival in Estonia for his support of Russia in 2014. He acted as Russia's special envoy, I don't know how to say that, to Venezuela, giving the Venezuelan president a katana, and the Venezuelan president calling Seagal his brother. We already have a lot to go over, so I won't go into the details, but if you don't know, the Venezuelan government are not super nice guys. Steven Seagal broke Sean Connery's wrist.
But a number of years ago, with a guy who's become very successful, Steven Seagal.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we're going to do a film called Never Say Never Again, and there was a possibility I was going to do Aikido and what have you, and I got a hold of Stephen, and we had this training in the building where I had an apartment, and he was really very, very good and everything. And then I got a little cocky because I thought I knew what I was doing, because, you know, the principle is it's defense, so it's a pyramid, and I got a bit flash, and I did that, and he broke my wrist.
Wow.
And, oh yeah, and it was so well put together here, I still have it. Broken.
Is it still broken?
Yeah. That's 15 years ago.
And it's still broken?
Yeah, I just found out last year.
He also sold homeopathic oil with a company named Living Essential Oils or Young Living Oils. Seems to be conflicting information about the company's name, which doesn't bode well. This company also sold something called Seagal meal, which was a breakthrough in modern nutritional science containing Chinese wolfberries and rice protein. Yum, yum, yum. Eat up your Seagal meal, children. He was also involved in a crypto scam. Fucking hell, there's a lot of shit to go over with Sensei Seagal. Bear in mind that this is all just the stuff that I didn't find interesting enough to make a whole chapter about, but we still have so much wacky stuff to look at. Anyway, back to the crypto scam. He was paid $250,000 and $750,000 worth of shitcoin to promote a company called Bitcoin, spelt with 2 I's. Nice. Bitcoin 2 Jan. Long story short, this was a scam, and Seagal was fined $300,000, and the guy who ran the scam was sent to prison for 5 years. Stephen also seems to do a lot of charity work, which is good, I guess. This is taken from his website, which has a whole page dedicated to his philanthropic activities, which, if you're being super cynical, you would say that this should be a private matter, not plastered all over the internet. But as long as the good's getting done, the reason doesn't really matter, I guess. He does a lot of work with children's charities in poor countries. Fucking hell, imagine being that baby. Born into such a rough start, you're in a hospital in some third world country, then all of a sudden Steven Seagal comes looming over your bed looking like he wants to eat you. Poor little fucker. Stephen does seem like he wants to help, doing stuff for children, animals and the poor around the world, which is a nice thing. I'll end this chapter with a quote from the man himself. Make of this what you wish. Quote, I was in a monastery in Kyoto and met some monks from Tibet who had been tortured by the Chinese. As I was the only one who had studied herbology, bone manipulation and acupuncture, I treated them, and there was an immediate connection. End quote.
You still fight?
Yes, I do.
You still dangerous?
Do you believe you're still as fast as you were even 10 years ago?
Maybe faster. Real fucked up, kind of bizarre combination of monkey shit. He's dying, he's severely hurt, maybe dead. And I said, you will find a projectile in him, you'll find a bullet in him. And they said, that can't be, you're crazy. And I said, you will find a bullet in him. And they called me in the morning, they said, you're amazing. And I said, why? And they said, there was a bullet in him.
So, we have looked at some crazy stuff and some bold claims, but it turns out that Sensei Seagal may not be the most reliable source of information. I know, shock horror. What a plot twist. I'm sure you never saw that coming. I feel like there's some kind of Stevie Wonder penis joke here, but I'm not clever enough to think of it. There are many examples we could look at here, but so that the video isn't 6 hours long, we'll look at just a few times that Stephen was caught fibbing, starting with stolen valor. One day, in a dojo far, far away, Stephen was standing in front of his class. Wide-eyed, they had just watched Steven Seagal effortlessly throw people left and right. But now was a time of learning. They had worked out their body, now a workout of the mind was in order. A quiet hush fell across the room as Sensei Seagal spoke. He began to tell stories about his time training with the Green Berets. The class was stunned by the bravery of Sensei Seagal. Not only had he been an entertainer and a teacher, but now he was fighting for their freedom. What a hero. One man in the class was not so wide-eyed though, and in fact looked confused, betrayed. The man stood up and said, Yo bro, I told you that story. That happened to me. Turns out Steven Seagal was a fibber. A fibbing little fish. A dishonest little horse. A big fat lying Steven Seagal lies so much about his non-existent time in the military that he can't even remember who told him what story. And also for future reference, Stephen lies a lot. Another story in this vein is when Stephen was treasure hunting off the coast of Barbados. You heard that correctly. Stephen was bragging to an ex-mercenary called Gary Goldman about his time in the Navy SEALs. Well, just after he'd finished bragging, Stephen nearly drowned in calm waters and had to be saved by Goldman, who dragged him back to the boat by his hair. Now, the Gary Goldman part of this story is pretty interesting. You see, Goldman worked with Seagal on some of his movies, and while working with Seagal, he would back up Seagal's claims of being in the military. But after the two fell out, Goldman would claim that Seagal became friends with ex-service people just so he could steal their stories. The Steven Seagal hating community, yes, you heard that right, seemed to use Goldman's claims as some kind of gotcha against Seagal, but I mean, the guy just admitted to lying for Seagal when they were friends, so why do you think he's telling the truth now that they're not friends? I don't know. Anyway, as I've learnt with this story, when you dig a little bit, 1,000 new rabbit holes appear. So remember at the beginning I said that Steven Seagal had connections to the CIA? Well, apparently Seagal offered a CIA operative named Robert Strickland $50,000 to assassinate Gary Goldman because he didn't like the things that Goldman was saying about him. We will look at Robert Strickland in more detail in the lawsuit chapter, as this is a new rabbit hole to go down, but I'm pretty sure that paying someone to kill someone is a crime, and Seagal's not in prison, so I don't know how true all of this is, to be honest. On the topic of the CIA, this is something that Sensei Seagal has alluded to many times over the years. He has claimed that while he was in Japan, he was approached by the CIA to do special work and favours which led to him meeting many powerful people. It does seem that Stephen has some kind of contact with the CIA through the aforementioned Robert Strickland and a guy named Herbert F. Saunders, who claimed that Seagal had asked him to blackmail a journalist and also gain access to confidential drug enforcement files he believed was being collected to frame him. It's honestly hard to say how true this is given the secretive nature of the CIA, but if it is true that Stephen has worked with the CIA, it does make his friendship with Vladimir Putin problematic at the very least. Stephen also likes to lie about his childhood. In an interview, he once claimed he grew up on the mean streets of Brooklyn where he had to fight the local gang members just to survive. As we've seen in the first chapter though, this is not true, with him growing up in a relatively peaceful place in Michigan and then moving to Orange County in California. There are many more examples of Stephen bending or outright snapping the truth, but I'll end this chapter with a little tidbit. Apparently, Stephen's name is actually pronounced Seagal, like the bird, but changed it when he saw an art exhibit by Mark Seagal and thought the name sounded cool.
I got to clean up my house after that neighbor's child came and dirtied it up, and then how about if I could meet with her tomorrow?
Well, it was exactly as I told him it would be. Exactly.
You're almost like a visionary. You call all the fights.
I haven't been wrong yet. People consider me, one of the great masters in my own field. And he just, he didn't listen, but he really shouldn't have.
Is that important?
Yeah, Travis.
Well, there you have it. Oh.
Yes, Travis.
Oh, there. He's on the phone. Sensei Seagal is on the phone, taking an important call there.
Okay.
Are you not a Joe Rogan fan?
I'm a fighter. I've fought all my life.
For someone who markets himself as a real fighter, it's surprisingly hard to find any evidence of Stephen ever having a real fight. I've been unable to find any fights in or out of the ring that he's ever had. Well, maybe you could argue that some of the things we're about to look at could be considered as fights, but personally, I wouldn't call them fights. First off, I'll lay the groundwork for this section. Steven Seagal is known in Hollywood for actually hitting stuntmen that he works with, which understandably means that a lot of stuntmen don't really like Steven Seagal.
Seagal put a stuntman's face literally through the glass for real. I had to shoot the scene with him as his partner. I had to constantly remind him. He would always, oh, you effing thespian, it's the thespian, and throw a punch, like inch from my nose, like always throwing a punch. Like, dude, that's every day. He was throwing a punch at me.
The stunt guys gave me all this like backgrounds, like be careful. This guy, the first thing he's gonna do, he's like, hey, he's gonna shake your hand and hit you in the nuts, kick you in the nuts. That's it. He's like, oh, hey, were you wearing a cup? Pop. He's just gonna pop you in the nuts. That's the first thing he does. Had a fight and a fight scene with him the day before. The same day. In the morning, and he beat the shit out of the guy, like literally beat the shit out of the guy.
Steven Seagal beat the shit out.
Yes, he went over the top to the point that they had to come and like grab Steven Seagal. Like, okay, we're done. The set is done. He's like, oh, okay, send the guy to the hospital.
So, let's look at the Gene LaBelle incident. Gene LaBelle was a well-respected judo practitioner, professional wrestler and stunt performer. While working with Seagal on the movie Out for Justice, Seagal made the claim that due to his Aikido training, he was immune to being choked unconscious. I'm not too sure that being choked unconscious is something you can be vaccinated against. This was a pretty wild claim, and Gene, having the kind of face that only punches can produce, knew that this was bullshit, so decided to put this claim to the test. So the two agreed that Gene would try and choke out Seagal. Gene wrapped his arms around Seagal's neck and waited for Steven to give the word that he was ready. Steven said go, and before long everything went black for him. Oh. When Seagal woke from his slumber, he had soiled himself. Oh dear. Gene says that over 30 stuntmen saw this, while Seagal called LaBelle a sick, pathological scumbag liar. This isn't the only time that the pair have expressed their dislike for each other. Another time, Steven had been shooting his mouth off about how he could beat up any martial artist, going as far to say that he would fight anyone to the death who thought that they could defeat him. Many well-known people in the martial arts world began to get tired of this, so formed a group known as the Dirty Dozen. Gene LaBelle was one of these men. The Dirty Dozen made an open challenge to Steven. Any one of them was willing to fight Seagal, and even had arranged a promoter to promote the fight. As you could no doubt guess, Sensei Seagal didn't take them up on this offer, but did stop talking shit about other martial artists, until the Dirty Dozen disbanded, at which point he went straight back to his old ways. On the topic of Steven talking shit about people, Steven really dislikes Jean-Claude Van Damme for some reason. I've been unable to work out why he hated him so much at the start, but as we'll see, he has a reason to dislike him now. So Steven just seems to have started talking shit about Van Damme.
Do you go watch the other guys? What do you think of Jeff Speakman or Van Damme? Do you know Van Damme?
No.
You've heard of him? Let's start with him, Steven. What do you think of his work? As a martial artist first.
Can we change the subject?
Well, I mean, because like you guys go back to the martial arts world before you were movie stars, right? I mean, he was like a champion somewhere, and right? I mean, you...
Well, I mean, I just promised all my mentors that I was going to be a good boy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a matter of opinion, that he was a champion anywhere. You know. And I mean, you know, I'm not being catty or anything. I wish the guy all the best. But there are an awful lot of people who say that that's not true.
How about Jeff Speakman? Nice guy, huh?
At the start, Van Damme seemed to take this on the chin and not care too much, but as time went by, Steven would insult him more and more, so Van Damme hit his breaking point. So, bear in mind what I'm about to tell you is a true story verified by witnesses. Sylvester Stallone held a house party in the 90s to which he invited Seagal and Van Damme. Some other people at this star-studded event were Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis and Madonna. Upon seeing Seagal, Van Damme was at his wit's end and a little drunk. He approached Steven Seagal and offered him to go outside and fight. Van Damme waited outside in Stallone's back garden for 2 hours, but Steven didn't show up and had already made his excuses to leave the party. Once Van Damme realised this, he began to go berserk, so he tracked Steven down to a nightclub and offered him to fight again. But again, Seagal disappeared, and sadly we never got to see who would win this fight. Sylvester Stallone is quoted to say this about the incident: "Van Damme was too strong. Seagal didn't want none of it." That was my Sylvester Stallone impression, by the way. Don't worry, I'm not having a stroke. No one really seems to like Seagal in Hollywood, and he is the butt of many jokes.
Many things. Is it your dream to work with Steven Seagal? Is that on your bucket list?
I know he dyed his hair. Stevie Wonder.
That's all now.
And so he goes into one of those trailers, you know, to meet with Steven Seagal, and he's on the set, and it's one of those big triple bangers where you go into this trailer and it's like you can get lost in there. It's a maze of pop-outs, you know. It's like, which pop-out is Steven Seagal? And he's in the 3rd bedroom to the left at the end of the hall.
Big star.
And he's waiting in there for 45 minutes. He's making him wait, sitting there by himself. Finally, Steven Seagal emerges from one of the other ante-rooms in the mobile home. And he comes out and he said, "I just read the greatest script I've ever read in my life." He goes, "Really? Who wrote it?" "I did."
And the first day we get together for rehearsal with the actors and the director, he comes in, "I'm in command. What I say is law. You disagree?" And I started cracking. I was like, I thought he was kidding. We were just hanging out.
Yeah.
And he Aikido'd me against the brick wall. Pow! Knocked all the air out of me. I was like, why? Why?
Yeah.
I mean, what I really want to say is how big and fat he is and how he runs like a bitch.
I think Steven Seagal has such a good presence.
Well, there's a rumor.
And there's a rumor, okay. And he should lose some weight, which is not that difficult. And I think he's got lots of charisma. Even though sometimes he speaks bad about me, it's all bullshit. I think he's a nice guy.
There's about 3-4 years ago, I was promoting one of the Tekken movies.
Right.
That Steven Seagal, this journalist suddenly said, hey, what do you think of Steven Seagal saying you don't know how to punch? I was like, what?
Yeah, because you're a boxer.
Well, I boxed as a kid, but
Yeah.
I know how to punch. you know?
Right.
I was like,
Did he really say that about
apparently
you?
he did.
Steven Seagal has also dipped his toe into the MMA scene. Not fighting, of course, but teaching MMA fighters. He has made many big claims, but most notably claimed credit for teaching John Jones a front kick. It does seem that he's trained with some MMA fighters at least, but for the most part this is seen as a bit of a joke in the MMA community, and he receives widespread mockery for his claims.
Obviously, the guy's a liar. I mean, he told everybody he taught Anderson Silva that kick. I mean, seriously, the guy doesn't have a very good track record. I'm so mad that he would say anything like that to Gene. Like, I don't want to give anyone another quote. I'm not giving you another quote. I would beat the crap out of Steven Seagal, but I bet I could. Hell yeah. You know what? If he says anything bad about Gene to my face, I would be forced to do so. Of course I would. I had to make him crap his pants a second time.
The guys that I'm training in UFC, you know, some of them have gotten their championship belts, world championship belts, because they've attributed that to me and me teaching them, so I still know a thing or two.
Yeah, now you owe me some good pussy.
So here we are, the lawsuit part of the video. Honestly, there's quite a lot of these, so I'm not going to go into detail on most of them, and things are going to take a little bit of a dark turn now. I would point out that anyone can make allegations, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're true. I wouldn't normally include this kind of stuff in a video for that reason, but there are so many allegations that I don't think it would be correct for me to leave them out. We'll start off with one filed in 2011 by this man. So, while filming Steven Seagal, Lawman, the show got the local SWAT team to drive a fucking armoured vehicle into this guy's house, which killed his dog. You would guess that this guy must be some kind of underworld kingpin, maybe a dangerous hitman. To just without warning drive a fucking armoured vehicle into the guy's house, he must be some kind of big time criminal. Cockfighting. He was suspected of cockfighting. Even though the man was suing them for $100,000, he mysteriously dropped the case around the time that his cockfighting charges were dropped. Interesting. Another one involves our old mate Robert Strickland, the ex-CIA agent. He sued Seagal for copying parts of his life and passing them off as his own. Strickland went into hiding because he feared what Seagal may do, and is quoted to say, "I think Seagal's dangerous. He's got the money and some very near-the-edge people who follow him around." I'm not sure if I'm just dumb, but I've been unable to find the outcome of this lawsuit, so if anyone knows, please comment below. So, now we've come on to the many lawsuits made by women against Steven Seagal. When I said I'm not going to go into the details of most of the allegations made against Steven Seagal, these were the ones I was talking about because there's a lot of them. In 1991, 3 women sued him for sexual harassment, but the case was dropped with an out-of-court settlement for $50,000 each. In 1995, he was sued for employment discrimination, sexual harassment and a breach of contract. In this lawsuit, he was accused of threatening and beating a woman during the filming of On Deadly Ground. The charges were thrown out by the judge. In 2010, he was sued by a woman for sexual harassment, the illegal trafficking of females for sex, failure to prevent sexual harassment and wrongful termination. This is the case that stopped the filming of Steven Seagal, Lawman. This lawsuit was for $1 million, claimed that Steven used a woman as a sex toy and that he had 2 Russian attendants who were available to him at all times, which I assume is where the trafficking part comes in. The woman later withdrew her claim without explanation. There are many, many allegations of this kind that range from sexual harassment to rape and everything in between. So yeah, that's not great. What I will say is that I didn't find any convictions for this kind of stuff, so decide for yourself if out-of-court settlements are an admission of guilt.
You've been very much caught up in all the allegations of sexual harassment. You had a rape allegation against you, and I wonder how you deal with all that.
Okay.
Steven Seagal has been a far more wacky and deep rabbit hole than I ever expected. I started this off not knowing too much. I'd seen the energy drink ads, which I found funny, seen some of his movies, and knew that he was viewed as a bit of a joke in the martial arts world. I know a lot of you guys like the martial arts stuff that I do, and I haven't made a video like that for a while, so foolishly I thought that I'd make a quick video about Sensei Seagal, have a few laughs, and move on with my life. Boy, was I wrong. Doing the research for this video was to wade through a weird, surreal quagmire of insane lies and facts, picking up turds unsure if it's the sweet chocolate of truth or shit. Steven lies a lot, but also people lie about him a lot, so I ended up leaving some stuff out of this video that I just couldn't find any proof for. So, what do I think of Steven Seagal? Honestly, I'm not too sure. Normally when making these videos I can get a fairly good idea of what kind of person they are, but this story just has so much weird random stuff, I just don't really know what to make of it all, to be honest. That being said, it seems clear that Steven is the remnants of a bygone era. The hyper macho man persona is not viewed favourably in the Western world anymore, which is why I guess he feels more at home in the East, and he comes from a time where you could say outrageous lies and no one could just Google it to disprove you. A relic that some wish to destroy and others wish to worship, Seagal is undoubtedly an odd character, and to be honest I found it very hard to find anyone that knows him that has a good word to say about him, apart from dictators and religious leaders that I guess want his money. Steven seems to be proficient in Aikido. If you think Aikido is fake or not, it still shows drive and at least some skill. Although we may mock him, it's hard to ignore that by any measure you wish to use, Steven Seagal has been more successful with his life than I have, and I would guess that most of you have. If you measure these things by money, then he's a multi-millionaire. If you measure these by family, then he's married and has 7 kids, and he's lived the life of a rich and famous movie star. So maybe we should be looking within ourselves as to why we mock such a man. Are we threatened by him? Jealous? Trying to drag him down to lift ourselves up? Only you can answer the question as to why you watched this video, and only I can answer the question as to why I made it. Let's hope that we all find the answers that help us improve ourselves. Just kidding, we mock him because he's a goofy c***.
There's an old Zen story of 2 monks that were walking across the bridge. And the junior monk said to his teacher, he said, "What is the Buddha nature?" And the older monk picked him up and threw him in the water. You know?
A big shout out to the channel members. I very much want your babies. If you've watched to the end of this video, then consider subscribing. If not, then just watch this video about Ashida Kim. He's a ninja. I'm sure you've watched enough YouTube to know what YouTubers want, so just do that and bye-bye.
Are you really as good as they all say you are?